Okay, welcome to Startup Hour with Monty and Andrea. And Monty has some very interesting information to share about basic podcasting. And we're going to talk about that today. And I'm a layperson, so Monty's going to school me on podcasting.
Okay. So podcasting was very interesting. And it was actually, we were talking about that yesterday, and it seemed to be something people were very interested in based on our conversation. And trying to see if there's still money to be made in podcasting. And I think it's sort of even more so than that. Right after we had that conversation, PodCon 15 was being done on Blab, and it was like from 12 to 4 o'clock, which I thought was very, I guess it was timing for both the East and the West Coast, because people in the East Coast were able to say, oh, okay, this is in the middle of the day, and people in the West Coast were like, okay, this is in the morning, so I can at least pay attention to it. Podcasting was really, really heavily paid attention to. And what's interesting to me is how podcasters are really starting to engage the online media and online community. Because 9 times out of 10, podcasters are just, they're talking about a subject, they're doing some affiliate marketing of what they're marketing as a whole. But they're building their credibility, they're building their expertise in a particular subject matter. Blab is something that podcasters who are usually pretty good at audience development, audience management. They're starting to use Blab like nobody's business. So they come into podcasting, they come into Blab as podcasters, and they're blowing it up. So like literally yesterday, they broke Blab several times. So I think they broke it once when Daryl was on. They saw it breaking, and then when I was on, it froze for everybody at the same time. And then I think Brittany's. And what I was always curious about is if it freezes or if it breaks, and nobody's in the room besides people on the side having a conversation, what happens? And I found out Brittany was there. She was able to keep the PodCon going, and she became the person who got control for like a brief second, if only just to say, hey, let me be in control. And then she allowed the other people to come in and actually manage the rest of the show. So it was just very interesting to see how she's working with the podcasting. But what I've always thought and what I've always looked at is the super user concept. And I think what Blab is looking at as their niche market for super users are podcasters.
How do you think that, here's the, I guess, complication, or I guess something that we're probably going to address in the future, and we're brainstorming on now.
Mm-hmm.
Is the idea that, yes, it's podcasting, but traditionally you would see maybe 2 people in the same room together doing a podcast, and now you have, I guess, essentially to create an alliance with maybe 3 people and leave an open seat. And then also the community, like the dynamic on Blab, it seems to be a little more open and organic than a very structured podcast would be. How do you think that's going to carry over? One, in terms of managing and building an audience that actually cares, or two, making money with Blab.
So my initial thought was sort of twofold. The best podcasters I know are able to manage an audience pretty well. And Blab is really, I'm sorry, I know the light's kind of weird. The best podcasters I know were able to manage an audience well. And one of the people I knew that did that well was Cliff Ravenscraft. And Cliff used to do, and I think he still does on Thursdays, a live broadcast of the 2 podcasts he manages. And in doing that live broadcast of the 2 podcasts he manages, he did streaming media. He would do like Ustream or one of those stream processes to do the podcast. Mm-hmm. So he would do the podcast. He might have a co-host on. He most likely wouldn't, and he would just be talking about whatever his subject was. Whether it was living a balanced life or what he was going to do at the next conference. Because a lot of times Cliff is helping him manage conferences, and to do that in that process, he would use some of the other back end channels to engage an audience, a live audience. So Cliff was a very interesting guy because he would actually have the live audience, have them ask some questions. He would talk to them, and maybe he would speak to them on the actual podcast. But Cliff's very, very professional in that. He would, have his mic set up. We'd see his full setup, his computer, his cameras. We would listen to his intro, and they play the intro. They do the sound bites. They do the outro, and then later he still would edit it so that it becomes the perfect podcast when when it gets to be finalized. Another guy who I know does an exceptional podcast, and he did the most interesting thing that I knew years ago. And bear with me, I'm just trying to move away from the light. He did the most interesting thing years ago, which was Leslie Samuel, and I know Leslie's on here, all the time. Cliff and Leslie are both on here on a regular basis. Leslie does one of the best live podcasts ever, and it's almost raw, unedited. He comes in, he does his initial setup, logistics, but then he comes in excited and live, like, "Hey guys, join us, and we're doing a great thing." And in that sense, he goes from interviewing to engaging to dealing with the dynamic audience and what their questions might be. Framing it back to the point, he's actually done these podcasts on here, and he'll leave the seat closed. He'll do his interview. After the interview, or while the show's going on, answer some of the questions, watch people. Might give a shout out to like Stephen Q. Shannon and all the people that are coming into the show, but at the same time, really engage in the direct person who's the guest. I think it'll translate well to those who understand how to do audience management. I think it'll be a challenge for newbies, but it's a good challenge to have, because if you've never had any of the equipment to do podcasting, that was probably one of the biggest cumbersome things, to get the mics, the mixers, the intro, the outro, all of those things you needed to really get a podcast up and running. It was a little bit of a cumbersome challenge. And then the technological challenges, if you're doing Skype, which most podcasters do, you'd have to do a mix minus, because, and this is, again, probably why a lot of people with Blab are using headphones. People don't want to hear themselves back. So, I mean, the blessing of, Blab is you don't have to have the headphones and the mic, but not everybody understands how to manage that sound so that you don't have to have the headphones and the mic. Yeah. But that's one of the things. It's like that mixed minus of, I don't want to hear myself when I'm talking to you, is what a lot of people had to deal with when it came to podcasting. And then they had to edit it, because with a podcast, in a perfect world, you're going to have separate tracks. You're going to have your track, which was recorded. You're going to have my track, which is recorded. And then you'll have the other tracks, which might be the audio intro, the audio outro. All of that gets put into Audacity, or it gets put into GarageBand if you have an Apple, which will be real cheap. And you then make it into one flat file. You upload it to a Lisbon server, and then Lisbon then has your RSS feed, which allows it to be found by people who subscribe to your podcast. All of those technological pieces, almost all of them are eliminated when you talk about Blab, because Blab just gives you the one audio file. You can have your intro, add it. You have your outro, add it. But then Blab allows you to just say, okay, let me just upload it to Lisbon, and from there it's done.
Mm-hmm. I think honestly, and I just actually wrote something about the democratization of like live streaming and live audio, and how that's changing the way we're recording media. And so one of the reasons why I haven't ever done podcasting before is because it seems like it was one thing that you had to do because of all the little pieces that had to come together.
It is. Yeah. It's a lot of pieces. Mm-hmm. It's always been, and that's the thing. Like I mentioned this before, one of the things I found out when I first got into blogging, it wasn't the first time I got into blogging, but it was like 2008, 2009. The best bloggers, first off, they had some kind of book saying how much of a guru they were, which was okay, understandable. People created ebooks all day, all night. But the second thing, when I started to pay attention to them in more detail, the best ones would say how much money they made. Some of them would say, I'm making $1 million. I'm making this, that, but they wouldn't give you the actual details. Pat was probably one of the first people to actually break it down and say, hey, this is how much I made. This is how much I actually cost me to make. So this is my actual net profit. And I think that was an interesting reality, because it sort of was a change of the game, because that's actually what I was looking for. I mean, I knew what I was making. What I was making at the time was I was making a full-time living from my blog. And I was doing nothing else, like not figuratively nothing else. I was literally, it was crazy because I wasn't even blogging. I was literally making a full-time, full check. That was my income from my blog. Matter of fact, the blog was paying me to just be able to do nothing. But I didn't know anybody else that was doing that. So I was just like, okay, who else is doing what I'm doing? And how many of these people are under the radar screen, and how many people are doing even more than what I'm doing? And that's when I started to pay attention to the Internet Business Masteries and find out about some of the people that were doing the networks. And that's when I was like, oh, podcasting? These people are doing podcasting. That's pretty interesting. And so again, 2009, 2010, it became popular, and now it's it's almost interesting because it's almost like it's having a resurgence, and meanwhile it's getting easier. So it's like the learning curve is easier, the technology is easier. Blab by itself is making it so much easier to become a podcaster, whereas 2, 3, 4 years ago it was all the equipment. Like I literally wouldn't want to say to anybody, don't podcast unless you had this. Don't podcast unless you had that. Nowadays, go to Fiverr, get a logo, get an intro, get an outro, get your basic stuff together. And then yesterday on the PodCon, they were saying, hey, I got a person on Fiverr who does my mixing. So you get your logo, your intro, your outro, you get all these things, less than $100. I mean, back when I started, it was probably,
couple thousand.
Well, I spent when I first got into it, I spent about $10,000 to really just get fully immersed in podcasting. I mean, I bought the equipment. I was a part of the mastermind. I learned from the coaches. I was not only a part of the coaching systems, but literally we had masterminds that were about $400 or $500 a month that we were paying just to stay abreast about what's going on in the podcast community, to be network with the right people. Today, Blab has sort of introduced that network to anybody. So anybody can build a relationship with those people who before it was like, okay, behind closed doors, you got to meet them. Now you meet them on Blab, and then it's like, okay, let's meet in person. I've seen you. I've built a connection. I built a relationship with you, and now I understand that you're legitimate. You actually know what you're saying. You're not just somebody that's on the internet saying you're a guru. You've actually had the experiences. So that's my immediate take to it. But yeah, it definitely is less costly today than it was even last year. Boss Jock, I mean, this is a sidebar to the whole point, because a lot of people from a podcasting perspective do live interviews, and I know on Apple it's one of those things that you can use, which is bossjock.com. It's $10. But I remember I was with Leslie when he met Boss Jock people, and he was like, man, I'm selling these packages for like $500 a pop, 1,000, and all these different things. And I went out there and I met with Boss Jock, and all that stuff is in this one little app for $10. He's like, man, that just changed the whole world. Boss Jock is still there. It's doing an amazing thing. But then you have Blab, which is it's changed the whole world again. But Boss Jock, if you're doing like an interview, say you're out at a concert or you're at an event, and you have an iPhone, because they don't do anything with Android just yet, you can have your entire intro, your outro, your mics, all that stuff is in an app, which allows you to basically take your computer and eliminate it. You can then use Boss Jock fully and record your podcast, which I thought was amazing. So as opposed to spending $500, you'd spend $10.
And see, here's the thing that I love, and also I kind of see it might become a problem. It's now that it's becoming so incredibly easy to run a podcast. There's going to be a lot of noise to cut through. What do you think people who have a specific message should do? Is it going to be more marketing? Is it going to be more external, like acquisition? People to come in and pay attention to them? How are we going to cut out the noise knowing that technology is so it's so accessible?
Well, I think two things are actually a factor of that. One, if you're building a blog, you're dealing with even more noise. I mean, back when, a few years ago, it was about 600 million blogs out there. I mean, that's not just websites. That's not just, the general, that's strictly blogs. It's probably more than that now. And at that time, there was less than 250,000 podcasts. And of those 250,000 podcasts, not all the podcasts are active. And of those active podcasts, a lot of them suck. So to get through the noise, it's 10 times easier to build a podcast, an authentic message, reach an audience. If you're doing the same audience with your podcast and the same audience with your blog, you're going to reach more people with your podcast than you are with your blog. Partly because your podcast can become blog content too. And that's one of the things that I paid attention to as well. It's like we can record this podcast, we get it transcribed, upload it to the website. That actual content becomes not only the podcast, it becomes a blog. But somebody says, "Oh, I'm reading this content. I'm reading what we're saying," and then I can listen to it if I decide I don't want to read it anymore. I'm just listening to the actual podcast. To that extent, one of the Silicon Valley gurus I know, and I don't say gurus lightly because this guy's an actual genius. Bill Ballou. I'll probably give him a shout out until he actually comes with the show. Bill Ballou absolute brilliant genius, ridiculous, insane guy. Um, he focuses on the content management side of things. And with Bill Ballew's perspective, it's about that consistent message. In a perfect world, and this is even more if podcasters would do that, most of them won't, producing 3 pieces of content every day will allow you to become the authority in anything. If you've done it for 4 to 6 months, 4 to 6 months, you can beat everybody in Google, everybody in all the search engines. But the consistency is you have to do that actually specifically every single solitary day, morning, noon, night. Put that content out there. You can dominate that industry.
So I think basically what I'm getting is more noise, probably better if you focus and come in with a strategy, a specific message. What do you think?
You have to. I think one of the biggest things is you have to measure. You have to measure everything. So I wouldn't just come at podcasting or blogging or any of the things without having not just a strategy, but a way to start measuring your success. You really start to say, okay, this is my hypothesis. I think if I blog about this many times, or I podcast about this many times, I will have X result. If that works, great, continue to pursue that. If it doesn't, you have to tweak it so that you can then build more in that same line. I have to be honest. Somebody asked about Blog Talk Radio. I've never really been a fan of Blog Talk Radio per se, and I can't even profess to know what's going on with Blog Talk Radio. I paid attention to it initially. I actually was on a few Blog Talk Radio shows, and they were to me, they weren't as professional as the podcasters. The podcasters were very much organized and structured. Don't get me wrong; they had the great equipment, they had the great systems. They were playing music. They were really doing stuff that was awesome, and some of them were really kind of talk radio shows. To me, and this is just from my experience and going to the person that founded Podcast Movement is a friend of mine, and I knew him before he did that. It was really very second generation radio. And actually somebody did ask a question. I was going to go into that, which is talking about the broadcasters. A lot of people that did the Blog Talk Radio were radio broadcasters. So it was the same kind of feel as the radio show when you went to Blog Talk Radio. And to me, they're totally different. I mean, Blog Talk Radio is more like blogs, it's more like podcasts than it is radio. But Blog Talk Radio had the same feel of a blog as opposed to, I had the same feeling of a radio show that it did a podcast or a blog. It is so easy, tremendously easy for radio broadcasters, DJs, people that are of that radio background to physically get into podcasting and succeed because they're used to having a structured schedule. If you build that structured schedule here, then you will have a lot more of a niche audience and you can start to do that testing. Like that, the one thing I think that's different between most radio shows and podcasts, podcasters by the nature of who they are focused on testing. If the radio show DJs who have the equipment, have the experience, have that background, started to test the way some of the podcasters, the top podcasters, not everybody, the top podcasters tested, they would crush it. Yes, Daniel Peek is incredible, and I've heard of him, and he's a great businessman.
Steven, full disclosure, I'm totally a layperson at podcasting, and Monty is schooling me. So everything, I have I was telling Monty last night, I have 25 unlistened to podcasts going on right now on my phone. And this is the big question for me, and the big question Monty's addressing too is how does it translate to building an audience now that it seems like podcasting is sort of taking over and blogging is kind of growing at a slower rate. It's there.
It's there, but so here's the one thing that remains true. And in terms of and Stephen Q, I'm not sure if you want to open up a seat for
Oh yeah, please. Stephen is awesome. He is he says he's a hack writer, but he is an awesome LinkedIn person.
Awesome. I got to connect with him.
Yeah.
No, I'm not aware of the radio in MK. And one of the things I think about specifically when it comes to blogging, the podcasting, and all those things, first and foremost, most of the searches are 3 terms or 3-word searches, 3 to 5, the majority of searches. And in being 3 to 5 searches, there aren't many websites that are actually specifically subject matter dense with that search in mind. So,
are you talking about like long tail keyword phrases type thing, or
yeah,
are you talking
exactly.
about,
So I'm talking long tail keyword searching. So
I know about that stuff. Let's talk. Go ahead.
well, I mean, but see, that's the thing. That's what podcasting is. At the end of the day, it's still going into the concept of subject matter density. It's talking about the SEO dynamics. It's looking at how people actually will be able to take what they have offline and show their expertise online, and then translate that into business back offline. I think that's one of the biggest challenges people haven't had, that offline strategy when they're doing this online content production. But podcasting effectively, podcasting with a plan, allows you to really build that solution in your scope. Hey, the name of the show is X. The reason that the name of the show is X is because I'm focusing on that niche. Hey, Steve, how are you? Good to see
Fine,
you.
it's good to see both of you. I can't even speak straight. Been on a lot of different missions, but when we talk about podcasts, because of my, I'll admit, 40 years as a suit in broadcasting, cable TV, special service common carrier, and actually started all that as an on-air second banana. I don't know if people know what that means, but basically I was the guy that gets the pie in the face on a kid show in one of America's first independent TV stations. So I was there when black and white television began, at the risk of dating myself, but there's no risk. So
right.
I do it. So I see a resurgence, if there is such a term, of podcasting, even at the point where people are saying, wow, podcasting, great. I mean, I never knew it went away.
I'm right there with you. I never knew it went away. And I think what's happening is that it's almost like every time there's more devices that come out, and one of the most interesting things is podcasting has had so many dynamics. It was part of iTunes initially, and Apple stripped it from iTunes and gave it its own app, and all the podcasters were like, oh my gosh, people now have to download podcast app in order for them to get the podcasting. So many of the syndications that used to put it out there for free went away. It's had challenges, but because the podcasters, and I'm saying specifically podcasters, a lot of them build their audiences, and they build their audiences not with just the RSS feed. They build their audiences to get an email list. They build their audiences Twitter. Twitter and LinkedIn and all the other platforms are good, but getting your email list, getting that direct connection with people is what the podcasts have really allowed folks to do more so than anything. And I think that's what has allowed it to have what seems like a resurgence, because people come in, they have their audiences, rules change, the game changes, but they still have that audience. So case in point, when it comes to Blab, podcasters are able to say, hey, you know what? I have an audience of 10,000 people, and I just go to where they are.
Yeah. Can I make a comment about that? Because I'm fascinated by, I'm addicted to change. And in fact, when I was for 24 years as a quote unquote professional career trainer, and then when you put the word career and trainer together, they say, oh, you're retraining people for new jobs. No, it's training people in the intricacies of finding a job. So while that was going on comes Meerkat, Periscope, and so on, and Blab. My theory, for what it's worth, I'd be very interested, because I'll get to the topic, stay on topic. I think it depends upon your personality. If you look at it this way, we all learn by sight, sound, tactical, emotion, motion, anything that's moving. My dad was addicted to animation. If I brought a girlfriend home, potential girlfriend, right, home, and she was laconic, introverted, let's say. I don't think that maybe it goes together. Intelligent, certainly smarter than me. You always hire and marry people smarter than yourself. He wasn't impressed. And if she wasn't perky and just, let's get with it. So Blab, going backwards, is perky, animated, bizarre, off the wall, and may stay that way. A lot of people say, well, it'll settle down. I say, I don't think so, because and I'm a great believer and follower of Seth Godin, started following him in the early 90s, maybe before something. Yeah, okay. So I don't have to describe who he is. And, of course, Andrea is very, very much aware of him, maybe because of me. I'm not sure of that.
Yes,
but
largely because of Stephen. Did you know that Stephen sent me Seth Godin's book? He mailed it to me. He didn't. Yeah, and I love him for that because and this is the thing about Blab, which is what I was talking about earlier in terms of how the community is sort of organic. How is it going to be received? And go ahead, Stephen.
No, I love that. I mean, that's what it's all about. And I find, by the way, even with the most bizarre people, they already, no one sent me a manual, right? Isn't it marvelous? It's sort of like being born again, right? Because when you leave the hospital, you really should attach it to your toe. I guess it's not so nice because they have toe tags for people that are dying, but attach to some and say, look, save this for the age of reason, which is getting earlier and earlier, and say, because it hit me the other day. I'm waiting for my wife to come downstairs from seeing my brother-in-law, and that's another story. It's distracted the two of us and got other thoughts. So a cute little girl, just as, sort of like, I'm addicted to Annie. My family would not go with me to see Annie. And I'm not talking about Annie, Get Your Gun. I'm talking about Annie Warbucks and all that. So as the little girl's walking on, she's just free and having fun. And her mom says, you were born here in this hospital. It was like she was saying prestidigitation on the half shell. I mean, it meant nothing to her. And her mom, because the youngster's so bright, probably has moved beyond being born. She said, oh, come on, Mom. That's so 20 minutes ago. She had no clue. But the point is, she has no imprinting yet. It's going on, and hopefully it will be positive. So that she's going to pursue how she likes to be, quote unquote, entertained, trained, edutainment, which I don't really like that word, but you know what I mean. So I pose the question. Podcasting is not for everybody. Blab is not for everybody. Meerkat's not for everybody. Certainly when I talk to people that were 65 plus who were volunteers at a new hospital I went to because I'm going through my physical exam, and so I had to go off-site. I elected to go off-site because I get to meet new people. And these people at the front desk were dynamite. I mean, I could just see them on Blab. They go, I described Blab. They say, oh, no, we don't want to do that. And the three of them, there was one missing for some reason. They're there 4 hours a week on Thursday. They're the Thursday crew. Well, I don't know if you could have four other voices on pod. When my training is, don't put four hosts on the radio. Okay, so I think of podcasts, and you're straightening me out about it because I'm not done a podcast. Certainly able to do it, I imagine. But putting four voices, man, I would, as the producer, because that's what a suit does, as a general manager of radio stations across the country, 8 moves. My wife's still with me. You have to keep re-identifying and like stop right now. By the way, we're talking right now with Frick, Frack, and Jack, and my name is Bob, so that people can identify who you're talking to, even if you're just interviewing one person. My training is about approximately, and people have argued with me about this, whom I respect, every 7 to 8 minutes. Here's the name of the station, the podcast station. Here's my name, and we're talking to Daniel Pink, who does random podcasts, and we're talking whatever. So I think that the discipline, I'm not hearing that. Go ahead.
So I agree with you. I think that's one of the big disciplines that's not there with podcasting, and here's why. At the end of the day, the podcasters usually, outside of doing this kind of a situation, which is more of a live, and it's akin to the radio side of things or live TV. With the podcaster's mindset, it's modular. I'm engaging this person not live. I'm engaging this person on their phone. I'm engaging them while they're in the car. I'm engaging them while they're working out. I'm engaging them in this dynamic where I do my intro of the show. I do my intro of who the guest is and what the topic is. And from then on, we're having a conversation. It's like we're just talking about what you're the expert at, and I'm continuing to learn from you and grow from you. But at the end of the day, one difference between this and radio shows and TV shows is that at some point in time, let's say they stop, they'll probably come back and finish those podcasts. So case in point, Andrea has a lot of podcasts that she's not listening to, but they're still in her queue. She hasn't deleted them, they're there. And she'll probably go back to listen to maybe one, two, maybe all of them. But she'll listen to them, and when she's listening to them, she knows who that guest is. She knows who this person is because she's specifically in there to listen to that subject matter expert and gain some knowledge. So it's really very specific.
Is it the familiarity? I think what you're saying is like the familiarity of, and this is the new trend I'm seeing, is that we, as the internet has evolved, are now having greater control over what we want to see, I guess, how we experience the internet. So what you're saying to me is podcasting is still relevant and blabbing is still relevant as well. I mean, it's relevant, obviously, but podcasting in itself is still relevant because we have this familiarity. We're not just listening to random podcasts or random audios. We know why we're there for that specific person and people. So it's sort of like a super fan age or something like that.
It's very much like that, but it's also, let's say you pick up a newspaper and you're reading that newspaper. And when you have this newspaper, you're reading their article. Thought it was interesting. It was the Washington Post or it's the Wall Street Journal. You're reading it. You're paying attention to the article. You're paying attention to who they're talking about. And it's an article that's talking about, let's say, Intech, for instance. They're doing something with their real images. They're allowing people to be able to build a new microchip. You're reading that article. You didn't carry that Wall Street Journal with you. You go someplace else. When you open up the Wall Street Journal again, you may or may not be trying to find out who wrote the article. You may or may not be trying to figure out what paper this was that you were reading. More likely, you'll just be like, okay, I left off here. Let me go back to that point. And that's what the podcast is looking at. It's more, they're assuming that you're going to be using it on a mobile device. They're assuming you're going to be listening to it at some later time. You may finish it the whole way through, but you might just stop it. But they don't necessarily do. Sometimes they do read, but most times they don't.
All right. You say tracking and keeping aware. You hear me okay? Okay, fine. Thank you. I've got a gamer type headset and it's beyond my pay grade. So this was what happens to me because at my age, everything reminds me of something else. This is stolen from a broadcaster you probably never heard of, Lowell Thomas. He spoke to our ad club one time, was 88. He would go 1, 2, 3, 4 off topics and migrate back to what he was talking about. So a couple of things went to my mind so far that I love your inputs because I understand what we're doing here. What is your experience with vlabbing? V as in Victor, Labbing. What is vlabbing? And this is not quite on topic. What research have you done on testing headlines for blab casts, if you will, keeping it, according to Robert C. Stern, keeping it to 40 characters? I think that I don't know. I have tested some headlines and have used them. I think there's so many variables, I don't know that you can really test a headline. But I'm going to keep at it because there has been, and this is a tip to you if you want to go along with me and say, how do you write your headlines for Meercasts, Blabcasts, Periscope casts, or whatever, and then podcasts? So blabbing and headlines are two disparate items that I'd love to hear from you about it. And anybody who is watching and texting or commenting or mentioning or whatever you want to call the right-hand column. I'd love that. Go ahead.
So, blabbing, and forgive my ignorance in this concept, but my perspective is like the video aspect of blab. Is that what you're saying when you're saying blabbing?
No.
Okay.
The video aspect of doing a written blog.
Okay, so gotcha. The vlogging kind of scenario.
Yeah, it's really, I said blabbing, but it's my mistake. Vlogging, almost like flogging, but
Right,
okay, you know what I'm getting. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I would get off the track there a little bit because I was thinking about blab.
I'll touch on the vlogging part a little bit. I actually used to do some direct digital marketing for a church. We actually had 14,000 members. I helped a church to.
That's a mega church.
It's in relative terms. I actually I was one of the first people to really help to do that with the churches when it came to the video component to it. And it was
I have no problem with that. I've experienced that here, by the way, with Christ Fellowship that has a church overlooking Central Park in New York. Go ahead.
Wow. What was interesting to me, though, is that I went to an event. It was, matter of fact, Social Media Examiner had their very first conference. I was there. And at that time, it was maybe 5 churches that were represented in Social Media Examiner.
Yeah. Good guy. Good guy.
Yeah, very good guy. But it was interesting to see all the churches. I was with 14,000. They had churches that were far bigger than the church I was representing at the time. And to that extent, I really paid attention to how the streaming media engaged with the online media when it came to digital marketing, and really sort of directly understanding how the actual church could generate tithes and offerings. And at one point in time, the tithes and offerings from the online component were generating as much, if not more, than they were actually coming to the church. And we're talking
amazing. Amazing. Church. Must have had a good way of doing it. That's off up, huh?
It was a horrible way. I came up with this as a random idea, and I said, "Hey, let's test out using PayPal."
Yeah.
And they used the PayPal, and the PayPal was something to this day. It's still not been changed. I mean, there's things that can be done to vastly improve that.
Well, you could write a book. You could write an ebook. I'm a great promoter of ebooks. And by the way, there are more free books from Seth Godin, as you may know, but I don't know if you're aware of 2 things. Check him out on one of his first anti-PowerPoints called Sliced Bread, where he has no bullet points, is my hero. And his book, free book, about 35 pages long. Every one is an expert about something.
I will check both of those out. I appreciate that. I'm a huge Seth Godin fan ever since Yahoo, and his whole story with Yahoo is really one of the most amazing stories for me. One, because I was a fan of Yahoo when it first came out because their color's purple, but that's a whole other story. But to your second point, when we were talking about the organizing and testing, the background
headlines, yeah.
Well, from our perspective, and I'll give you sort of 2 different things. One, to me, headlines is really speaking to optimization. And I came from a background where we were doing online digital direct marketing. And in doing online digital direct marketing, we did an optimization schedule, which essentially we tested thousands of headlines at the exact same time for the same content.
Wow. I'd like to know about that. That's interesting.
We had an analytical team and a database which would allow us to test headlines across several platforms. The same headline, the same structure, the same approach, the same content, but just with a split test with several different components. And then we would come back with an aggregate data on a weekly basis to say, okay, here are the kinds of headlines that work the most effectively for communicating our message. We're getting subscribed. We're getting call to action. So we weren't just putting headlines out there to get readership. That's cool. We wanted conversions. So we actually had a weighted average based off of those actual readers who clicked on the headline. From the headline, they took action, which resulted in an actual conversion, whether it was to sign up for the newsletter, whether it was to make a purchase. All of those things were tracked on an analytic basis. So that's my background. And one of the most interesting stories I have with that is I remember from a headline perspective, and this is more of a graphic headline than a general headline. We were talking about Elvis has left the building. It was incredible to me because this is 20 years ago, and we were like Elvis left the building, and we would then have the follow through is he went to here, and this was the subject of the actual content that they would actually then have a call to action. That performed for years as the best performer. And it did two things. People clicked on it because they were interested. But when they got there and saw there was a relatively understood conversion to say, okay, and this is what he's doing, or this is why he's doing it, or this is why he left the building, it was an amazing conversion because people.
Yeah, you hijacked, if I can interrupt a little bit, you're familiar with the term. You hijacked a celebrity who crosses. I mean, my wife at 72 still pines for Elvis, and we saw him twice in person in Omaha, and then in person 2 different times in Las Vegas. In fact, right, we got off the plane. I think flying in, she could see the sign, Elvis. So we get off the plane, didn't go to the hotel. We went to see Elvis. And it wasn't even full at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, wow. It was just bizarre. So I call that hijacking. So you had a little help.
Absolutely. So we did that. But, it's sort of it was the low-hanging fruit. It was the softball we throw out there periodically. But we used thousands of different terms. And it was almost one of those things where we would test. We did 2 tests. We tested the engagement with Elvis left the building versus other headlines. Yes. And then we also tested long-term, if a person came through as an engaged client as a result of Elvis has left the building, what was their lifetime value add?
Wow, that's pretty heavy. And can you reveal the results?
Irony. There was disparate. There was no weakness in a person that came through Elvis left the building versus a relevant headline. So it allowed us to say, okay, so if we have a headline that is more catchy and drives more traffic to us, and that person becomes a member or becomes a buyer or becomes any kind of there's no. So that's why people actually end up using some of the more catchy and controversial headlines, because it drives much more traffic to their actual content. So from that testing perspective, I love that idea, and that's the optimization that we still do to this day.
Really? So I came in a little bit late. I know not everything I need to know about Andrea, except that she's a sweetheart. You know, she is just somebody you need to know in your life. And she's, so that is, I'm not saying anything new, but how do you,
With the headline, Stephen, see, what Monty is saying is a lot to do with the big business. And Monty, what is the budget for something like that when you test?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah. So we were a literal startup. So when we first started doing this, we had like $1,000 a week budget. That doesn't sound like a lot, but
it sounds great to me.
Right, but we eventually had like $1 million a week budget once we went public. So we would have, in the craziest scenario would happen, we would have $1 million a week budget. So, and I'm saying this is a literal situation that happened. Beginning of February, hey, here's $1 million, spend it all. We got to get as many people to come through this site and do this, that, and the third. And it was like, got to get it done. Week 2, stop all spending, cancel all campaigns. The budget is 0. We need to, not spend any money. Week 3, we got $500,000. We got to get rid of it right now. We have to spend this money on these same campaigns you just canceled and get that done. Week 4, okay, any campaigns that have not finished just yet, we want to finalize that because we want to make sure that, our quarterly numbers look like that. So it was really driven based on what we were going to have as a reporting to the shareholders. Meanwhile, we were still looking at the lifetime customer value and relationship management with the actual vendors who were driving traffic to us based on this optimization. So it was like we had to tweak things with some of the people. And what's funny to me today is that some of the people that we worked with then, or I worked with then, are still major players in the industry today. Some of the main major players on the West Coast. But that was based on that same, they were looking at algorithms, we were looking at algorithms. One of the most effective things that people were doing was just telling jokes. People that were telling jokes in the early 90s were making a killing. They were making an absolute killing if they were doing email blasts. And
did they write their own jokes? I can't resist asking. Did they have a staff?
No, the same optimization schedule that we're talking about here, where they tested headlines and tested components. It was like, hey, you want a joke today? Sign up for my email. Or you want a joke today? Do this. Sign up for that.
Wow. Wow.
And I know for a fact, because we were cutting checks for like between $250,000 and $500,000 a month to these people in the 90s for their joke processes.
And it's coming back to that, though, Monty. I mean, see, I had a conversation with the venture capitalist, and he asked me, he said, do you know how much it cost me to just test one headline? And I said, no idea. the consummate student, and it's about $10,000 a run.
Right.
Do you know how much it cost me to do it on Periscope or live streaming?
Nothing. And that's the reality. Like you really have the game's been changed, but people don't necessarily understand how the game's been changed.
Wait. Just, forgive me, but I think that went right by me there, Andrea. You're saying somebody's paying real money for testing, and you're saying you can do your own testing on Blab, Meerkat, Periscope, and 30 or 40 other video streams for zero.
Yes.
And the caveat.
Do you agree, Monty? Do you agree with that?
I wholeheartedly agree.
Whoa, that's weird. I mean, that's mind blowing. And she just, she's very smooth. It just flowed out of her mouth like saying, not a big deal. I think that's a huge deal. And the other side of the coin is, do you realize the entry level, let's say in Joplin, Missouri, to build a radio station, AM, with 4, 6, or 8 towers? I don't know if you know, but AM, the signal is like an amoeba. It goes, you got to control it, especially at night. During the day, not such a big deal, but at night, if your signal is oozing over here, you got to get another tower up. I mean, it's all copper wire, and people are stealing the wire, by the way, from AM stations. And she says, you went from $10,000 per headline, is that what I hear? To zero. So are we onto something about testing headlines, and do you recommend it?
I absolutely do. I mean, this is, to me, again, we tested an optimization schedule that had hundreds of different headlines we were tracking at the exact same time. Today, you can do a split test, 2 tests per day, or however many tests you want to do. It is definitely worthwhile doing. And,
okay. Would you be willing, so the three of us, and anybody else watching, this is worldwide, I understand that. Try not to think about it, because to say, who is that old guy? And Willie, who's holding him up in front of the camera so he don't fall down? But I've got a headline that I did test from Seth Godin.
Oh.
You know what the headline is?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so try to take this personally. Don't cry and don't throw things at the screen.
Okay.
Hey, Andrea, Monty, if you're so amazing, why do you need a resume? Question mark.
Very true.
Hey, you, if you're so amazing, why do you need a resume? So out of frustration, because I've been trying to support my wife, who emotionally, because her brother is going through some difficult times unnecessarily, and I won't go into the details about it because it's too graphic for this. It's not necessary. So my attitude is, I'm not going to be blabbing or meerkatting, or I don't do scoping because of the way the messages are set up. Again, it doesn't suit my personality, but it's great. It's fine. So I haven't gone on there, but the other day I had a moment carved out, because we're a one-car family on purpose. So I went on LinkedIn and changed my headline on LinkedIn, which I should do more often. I mean, I train people in the basics of LinkedIn, because most of it, if you talk about 10 things about LinkedIn before you do your headline, before you do your profile, even from me being around as long as I have, which are ground, simplistic, are usually very revealing, even to trainers of LinkedIn, because I'm well trained. So I went in there and wiped out my headline, didn't count 120 characters, which you can have, and put in there, if you're so amazing, how come why do you need a resume?
How do people respond?
Well, that's what I'm doing my own little test. I put it about 3 days ago. And so the answer is, I don't know. So, but I haven't done a blab. So get back to the point is, no matter what topic you're dealing with, just for the heck of it, see what happens if the three of us randomly, without checking with each other, because it's time of day, and so on and so forth. You go in there and say, if you're so amazing, why do you need a headline? I mean, a resume? Question mark.
I actually love that idea, and
see what happens, and then we'll come back and give the experience of specifically, not in terms of volume of people, but the people that come and view you. I mean, just a moment ago, Sean did a shout out for me. He says, I think you'd be great on a podcast.
Yes. Well, you're on a podcast right now.
Being exactly. Being an encourager on live streaming is so much more important than I can think of anything else. I mean, that gave me a real thrill. I don't know Sean. Maybe he's seen me before. Maybe I should know him, and I apologize that I don't remember. But that sort of little comment, just a little quick,
right?
That's terrific. So I'm just saying, if you've had the experience that I've had, I know Andrea has, and we've been together in some blabs in the past. Blabs from the past, yeah. Not from the 50s or the 40s. Right. Excuse me. But to just put in there, no hashtags, just clean, boom. And the 40 characters, I didn't even count it, but I think it's under or about 40 characters, because I respect Robert C. Stern. You know why I really respect him the most? Because he understands that there's a bunch of Roberts and Bob Sterns in the world. With the people that I've worked with, 4,000 professional men and women, I'd say, and there were some Jack Smiths, Bob Browns. Come on. You go onto LinkedIn, the 50, 15, 50, 500 Bob Stearns or Robert Stern, but he put a C in there, and it's like Dr. John C. Maxwell.
Right.
He got it years ago.
Awesome.
He's written, 60 plus books, 18 million readers?
Yeah.
That we hope. He didn't talk about people picked up the book, looked at it, put it down, bought it.
Yeah.
He's saying he's actually figured out somehow that 18 million readers, that's an old number, but not that old. But he got it from the start. I got to tell you, the frustration of working with these professional people once they get a job, nothing. No reinvestment. And if I'm offending them now, they know I love them, but I just couldn't handle it. So I shut down the company. I was being paid monthly by these people, and when I tried to shut it down, the checks still came in. I said, why? Because they thought they said, well, if I lose my job, I'll call you at 2 a.m. I said, no way, Jose. I'm not going to do that. So let's have some fun. You can still change the topic. That's the beautiful part of Blab. But go in there and see what happens. See if people got curiosity, come in and say, what do you mean? I am amazing. And I've got to have a resume, because no one will talk to me if I don't have a resume.
I love that idea. I love that idea of testing.
Not true.
On LinkedIn, because I'm a huge LinkedIn addict. We haven't even talked about LinkedIn yet. But
we're getting there.
Yeah.
I love LinkedIn. You know why? Because their stock has never dropped below $100. 60% of the people on LinkedIn, last number that I got from Nate Kievman, my mentor, and I know about Mr. Howes. I like him too. He's more simplistic. He gets to the point faster than I do, as most people do. So, but LinkedIn is 60% of the people on LinkedIn. And one other figure I'll give to you and see if you agree, because you like LinkedIn. 60% are unoptimized on their profile. It doesn't matter, apparently. They're very successful. I started with LinkedIn in 2007 with somewhere between 17 million and 21 million. Why did I start? Because one of my clients was scared of it. They thought it was like for him running nude down Main Street. He says, I don't want to be on that, scares me. Now, of the 40%, 97% do not have a professional looking picture, almost like having no picture at all. Or they might have one other person in the picture, or there's no lighting, or let's say that to my left, to my right for you, you're looking, okay, this is my right hand, okay? So if you have the torso in LinkedIn with your picture, look at the camera, good. You don't have to get a professional to make it, although I've recommended it. And they're looking away from the text. I mean, is astounding to me that when I talk to people about it, I say, does that really matter? I said, no, I just made it up. I just thought you'd be interested. And evidently you're not. I mean, you talk about LinkedIn. To my day, it's a new day every day on LinkedIn because LinkedIn changes every day in some small or big way.
I wholeheartedly agree. I actually had an amazing experience when I went out to the Valley. I physically went to LinkedIn, and one of my mentors, Bill Blue, who I'll keep shouting out until he comes on the show.
Good. What's his first name?
Bill, Bill, Blue.
Okay, all three of us. Yep. Bill, Blue, B-L-U-E?
B-E-L-E-W.
Okay, but it sounds like blue.
Exactly.
All right, so together, Bill, Blue, where are you? You're passe. You don't even know how to spell blab. I am. And
he probably doesn't.
I would be embarrassed if I were you involved with LinkedIn and you're not a host or co-host on Blab.
We'll get him here. But he actually...
you're a nice guy, I'm sure, because you know Monty, but you're out of it. Okay, that's good enough. That'll embarrass him to come on.
But Bill actually took me to LinkedIn. He was able to go and speak to LinkedIn personally and kind of teach them a few things based on his experience with overall marketing and digital strategy.
Wow, that's great. Hey, Bill, I take part of it back, but not everything. It just show up.
Absolutely. So Bill was able to go out there, and when they asked him, they were looking to talk to people like him, and they asked him, what is he looking for from LinkedIn? And he was like, I'm not looking for anything. People are looking for me. And as he said that, everybody laughed in the room. But then he never said who he was. And then who he was. And half the room was like, oh, you're that Bill Ballou. We were looking for you. And he's like, see, that's exactly what I mean.
No middle initial, probably. He just thought it was one of 500. Unlikely with the spelling of his last name. But
anyway, so to your point of the resume, I actually ended up going to a hackathon. And it was very interesting to me because I went to this hackathon. And it was one of my first experiences with hackathons. And they had a room, maybe about 500 people in the room. It was all iOS. It was all Mac people. And in this particular hackathon, there was a guy who, unlike anybody else, people had their computers, mostly had laptops. Well, not mostly. I think
in those days, yeah.
One person didn't have a laptop. But the interesting thought about this particular person, he had 3 monitors. He had his desktop. He had a laptop. Yes. He had like so much stuff.
He was way ahead.
And the funny part is, he was a one-man team, and he ended up winning the hackathon, which was amazing to me.
Wow!
I talked to him later. I talked to him before he won the hackathon.
Sure. And then you talked to him a lot afterwards.
Right, yeah. Exactly, I did. And talking to him during the hackathon, I had a conversation with him. His equipment was intimidating, but I was like, "What are you doing? Like, is there a partner?" He's like, "No, this is just me." And we talked to him a little bit, and I said, "Did you have any business cards?" He's like, "No, I don't have a business card. I don't have a resume. But if you're going to connect with me right now on LinkedIn. That's it."
That sounds like Brian Fanzo.
Yeah,
I'll bet you he doesn't have a resume. And you know what? I will wager right here in front. It's going to be a big bet. A sawbuck. Anybody know what a sawbuck is?
Never heard of it.
Get out of here. Okay, we're going to have anybody say yes, they know what a sawbuck is. And we'll give them an open set. And I will give them a sawbuck, but I will give a sawbuck to anybody that responds. Just yes. Look at the yeses coming through. 1.
Robert, okay. Robert's just ultra smart like you, Steven. That's all. Okay.
All right, did you see the answer? Did they give you the answer?
No. You have to tell us.
$10 bill.
I'm going to start using that. Sawbuck.
Yes, a sawbuck.
Okay. So now
that's the wager, is related to what we're talking about with LinkedIn, because even if are they 400 million? They'd usually The last number I heard was 1 million plus per week, maybe more.
Yeah.
That they're adding. What is it now, Monty?
No, I think you're still on accurate pace. I mean, probably about 1 million plus per week. And I agree.
300 million.
It's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, but it's amazing when you just think about the fact that this platform. I don't want to say it's been dormant, but when you go back to why LinkedIn was even formed, and we talked a little bit about this before with the PayPal mafia, you start to understand the value of LinkedIn. And you start to
I love that. PayPal mafia.
They are. I mean, that's it. They really were people that came, and it's so funny because you start to see the incestuous components of who were all associated with the PayPal mafia. I mean, Seth Godin, not Seth Godin. I'm sorry.
Hi, whoa.
McClure. Yeah, no.
Sorry, Seth. We didn't. By the way, Seth, where are you?
Right. Absolutely.
Come to think of it, you're our hero, and you're not here.
That's a good point. I haven't seen Seth on Blab at all, but I'm sure he'll find out about it and get on it.
And he'll do it in a beautiful way. I'm sure of that, because he's a classy guy, taken from my best boss, who was taken very early in life. Taste, style, and judgment. Everything that Seth does has those three components. If one is missing, it's flawed. And that is a huge compliment to Seth, not because I said it, but because my boss, Jim Conley, RIP, said that was the test of anything that we did. He was the former president of the ABC owned and operated TV stations throughout the country. Fired from that job. I was fired twice myself, so I can wear that as a badge. And then he became president of Meredith Broadcasting. Meredith is the publisher forevermore of the Better Homes and Gardens cookbook, the Better Homes and Gardens magazine, and Successful Farming. The Better Homes and Gardens cookbook, next to the Bible and the dictionary, is the largest selling non-fiction hardbound book in the world.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we got to get some of these other folks on, not because they're stars, but because, as Seth says, don't hide your light under a bushel. You've got a gift, Seth, share it. Your gift. When you take a look at actually, maybe we ought to put it on Meerkat or someplace like that, or one of the boxes. Sliced bread. What a great name. It's such a genius name. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he addresses that. How long it took for sliced bread to be accepted by the public. They said, why should I buy sliced bread when I got a knife at home? Aha, but what was the deal? It was the start of the convenience of having each slice perfectly equal, except for the ends, of course, which my wife prefers. And then you can make sandwiches and so on. It was a boom. But it took years for sliced bread to be accepted because they felt, I'm going to pay 2 more pennies for my bread to be sliced? Don't bother me. I'm going to be fine. So if that doesn't attract people to go to YouTube, all you do is plug it in. Sliced bread, it pops up. Talk about an easy search. Or do it on Google. That I think would be a great way to introduce before we're going to run your non-PowerPoint, non-bulleted PowerPoint.
And what was that again?
Bread.
What was his? Oh, that's what it was. Sliced bread was a non-bulleted PowerPoint.
That's the title. It'll blow you away, and it's not that fancy. You see, it's just great taste. And he's standing in front of this big screen. In effect, he was doing sort of a blog in a way because all the characters were behind him, and he was the host. Like I don't think it was a TED Talk, but it might have been. But if it was one of the originals. It takes if you're going to be a TED speaker, you got to be there for a week. You just don't show up, do your speech, and leave. You're committed to, and I mean it's a long week. Not like I've not been there, but I know people have TED Talk, and they devoted by the way, a podcast by Mitch Joel. Have you ever heard of Mitch Joel? Does a podcast every Sunday. And his opening remark is, if you were the guest, Monty, who are you and what do you do? And then he sits back and the guy goes, for 5 minutes, he says, hey, it's my podcast. I got some questions asked. Mitch Joel, he's from Canada, and he runs a company called 6 Pixels of Separation. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've heard 6 Degrees.
6 Pixels. He also wrote a recent softbound book, which sounds old hat, but it's only about a year and a half old, called Control, Alt, Delete. Mm-hmm. Talking about your career, to reboot, Control, Alt, Delete. And I bet you there's some people on here have never heard of Control, Alt, Delete. Never used it.
Book, but I've heard.
Yeah, well, have you?
Yeah, but I never read it, and sorry.
Oh no, you don't need to apologize. I mean, you can name a lot of books that I haven't read too, and I should have, but I have read a lot of nonfiction, and I have read a lot of books written by recruiters, because they're all 250 pages too long. And you know what they tell you? Is that recruiters are paid to exclude you. And once you understand that, you'll have a better chance of getting remembered and being remarkable. Because after all, Monty, if you're so darn amazing, how come you need a resume?
The funniest thing about that is it speaks to your point. I remember I went to a startup event just recently, and I was not there to be recruited. I was just kind of there looking at the startups and talking to them. And so we were talking about some different things, and there was a recruiter that was there at the event looking for potential people they could bring into their company.
To a startup, you mean? That he was recruiting for startups?
He was a recruiter for a startup, but they were actually there presenting their startups. It was like a demo day. I probably talk about this every day.
Okay.
So in this demo day, they were actually talking about what their startup did. It was a really cool startup that I was aware of, and I actually sent some referrals there. I mean, it's not that I was trying to go there, but I sent some referrals there, and I thought it was pretty interesting as a whole.
Sure.
In talking to the recruiter, what they were saying was just like you said. They get hundreds of resumes every single day, and they couldn't draw the resumes. They were like, they could care less. But they come to these events to meet people, to actually engage them, to talk to them. And so again, I talked to them. I had a conversation. We were talking about their business. We were talking about some of the things that could apply. I talked to them about what I actually did, and then I said what my name was. I was like, okay, thanks, bye. And they were like, no, wait, don't go. I'm going to talk to you some more. I was like, okay. And then we talked a little bit more.
Hey, that's what vaudeville is all about. That's like, I'm soon going to drop out of here because to have the knowledge of when enough is enough. And this is from Seth. What does he talk about daily? Scarcity. And what is scarce? Person's attention. Mm-hmm. Don't overstay your stay. Congratulations. Right. I mean, that you could do a seminar on just what you just said there, or maybe a podcast.
This is true, but it spoke back to what your point was, because at that time I had no resume. I wasn't prepared I wasn't trying to give them a resume. I wasn't looking for a job. I was just like, hey, I'm talking to you about what you're doing, and you told me what you do. I told them what I do, and they were like, forget your resume. I just want you. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we'll talk. But yeah,
hey, you just made my day. I mean, we'll have to have Andrea. We'll have to have Monty on one of our career deals, because she supported one of the very first I ever did, excruciatingly early in the morning, so I didn't interfere with my wife cleaning the house on Saturday morning, which she does. That's her. How would you say that? What do they say about shopping, retail therapy? Well, it's cleansing is her therapy. She literally cleans the house because she's not going to clean the office, to get all the office and all the stuff that's bothered her during the week, being both a customer service person and an IT person. So she has 22 computers that she's in charge of peer-to-peer. I think it still is, which is an old hat thing. And she has to deal with, are there any doctors nearby? Doctors who are just nasty. They call them and said, our air conditioning is broken, or you get out of here right away, or I'm not gonna pay my rent. Well, of course they can't do that. Or they get their wife to call and the wife poses as a doctor. And she's not. But she thinks if I call up and say, this is Dr. Sharifan, that something good will happen, a repair person will appear immediately. So that's when Andrea and I got together behind closed doors and did a blab about career things. But you know what? People want to talk about other topics, and I love it. Mm-hmm. You know, I had hoped that other people who were involved in careers, by the way, if you want to have a little fun, take a keyword and do an advanced search, because then you won't affect it, on LinkedIn. One time I wondered how many people are using career, the word career, not career trainer, career coach, just career, in their profile, in their summary, headline, whatever. 2.3 million, and that's when they were under 100 million. You talk about competition. But if you've got your training, you can show above the fold on the first page on LinkedIn if you use your keywords properly. And that was a strength. It still is. But Nate Keeban deals with companies primarily. But one time he allowed 15 people, he invited 15 people to be trained at what I call dirt cheap. And just learning about how to do an independent search even while you're on there so that you don't get affected by your connections, and using keywords properly. Again, for anybody listening, if you've neglected, and I would dare say that 90% of the people here, if they're on LinkedIn, what have they done? They've neglected their profile.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it myself.
At Stephen, he sort of became my mirror and said, read your profile to me. And when I read it, it sounded so pretentious. Like I wouldn't even, it's just ridiculous. But
would have turned you off as a viewer, right? As a browser.
Yeah, like really, you know. But he helped me realize that there is optimization in the tiny, minute details that
then see, that appeals to me, but obviously it doesn't appeal to most people.
It's funny,
and I'm not talking about tricks or tips. Mm-hmm. I look at LinkedIn as a fertile field, the best loam in the world. I used to live in Iowa. It's not Idaho. A lot of people get confused with Idaho and Iowa. Iowa's the one is the corn state. It has under 3 million people and 99 counties. They wanted to merge some of the counties to cut back the costs. Oh, no. You're not going to take our county seat away. So they dropped that idea. But to me, that's what LinkedIn. How do you describe LinkedIn, Monty? Because that's one of your faves. How do you describe it in terms of relating to food? I related it to growing food. Mm-hmm. Do you agree? And I'd like to have your imprinteur on it. Do you see the fact that it's lying there, fertile field, and being neglected?
I absolutely do. And I was one of those, like both of you, who I had a LinkedIn profile because a friend of mine, it's funny because when I got on Facebook, a friend of mine was like, nah, you need to be on LinkedIn because LinkedIn's where it's at. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll get it. So I set up a LinkedIn profile, didn't do anything with it for years.
Right.
And then I actually ended up having, I was like, okay, I want to get over 500 people. And I made that effort to get to over 500 people. And it was interesting to me because I struggled to get over 100. Then I got over 2, then I got over 3, then I got over 5. And then it was actual people that I knew. So it was very interesting. So bring it all back to, I actually took a course with a guy on LinkedIn. And it was the Lewis House that you mentioned.
Yeah, Lewis is fabulous. He's awesome. Of
course. And I used it. I got a job. I thought it was very interesting how that process worked. But then I found out.
Wait a minute. You said you got a job from LinkedIn?
I did. I did his course with the intention of understanding.
Oh my gosh, it worked.
It worked. I wasn't planned. I just wanted to see if the course actually worked to do what it said, and it did. So I thought that was interesting. And
now, who are we welcoming here?
Dan.
Hi guys. Hi, Stephen. Andrea.
Hey,
Monty.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, I heard LinkedIn. I heard the word LinkedIn come on, and I'm like,
Dan, wait a minute, Dan. Are you a swimmer?
Am I a swimmer? No, I'm not a swimmer.
Well, how come you got some beauty? I'm not into guys, but you got great pecs.
Oh, you can see my pecs from?
Absolutely. Slow down, Andrea. I know you're a happily married woman, but he's got great pecs.
I can't.
He must work out.
Oh man, I came in to talk about LinkedIn. Now we're talking about my pecs and say, oh my goodness, what's going on around here?
Okay, go for LinkedIn, and Andrea doesn't mind because we've worked together before, so she knows I'm a blabbermouth, a blabbermouth.
A blabbermouth. No, I mean,
Dan, what do you think? What do you think?
Well, the reason I jumped in, is because I always looked at LinkedIn as like, it was never up. It was never the turn to social media, and now, that I started my business and I've seen everybody talking about LinkedIn. I mean, a lot of attention is going to that. So I'm just here to try to learn from you guys to see, what are the tips that I need to be doing? Like you said, Monty, you said you got a job off of LinkedIn. Like, to me, that's unheard of. Like, I didn't know people went onto LinkedIn to actually go look for potential hirees. I
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Dan? The job. I wasn't looking for the job. The job came.
No, but that's what's beautiful. You don't ever want to look for a job because you look dateless and desperate. But Dan, 85% of recruiters go to LinkedIn, and if they don't find you on LinkedIn, and if you don't have a picture, because they're paid to exclude you, they throw the resume, the business card, or your name away.
Yeah. That's what the recruiter at the event said, that she goes to LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, she doesn't validate you. And that's one of her criteria is to eliminate those hundreds of people that she actually gets. One of those interesting things wasn't even getting a job on LinkedIn. I actually, after I grew the thing, I took the course, I ended up getting about 1,780 people in my LinkedIn network. I had a person who was consulting me to hold a conference and said, hey, so-and-so. I was like, I have no idea who that is, but I knew them from my network because sometimes I just forget who I know. In any event, they said, that person. So I sent out a survey to really understand more about who my audience was and how I could help them. And then the other concept of that was I was asking for endorsements. Somebody told me to do it, and so I did it. And because I did that, I ended up getting not only more people in LinkedIn, I actually ended up getting some investors. So I got, because of the survey, literally the survey which I was asking for endorsements for, got me investors in the company. They're also
why doesn't LinkedIn do more, quote unquote, the endorsements are okay, I love recommendation, but what I'd call in show business, a blurb. By the way, that's probably the next stream, going to call it blurbs, and there'll be video blurbs or whatever. But a blurb is a thing that says smashing, riveting. As we used to say, for Mother Nature type nature films, nude reality, naked realism. And if people would go in there and say, what it is, this is about the mountain goat and no flesh. So that to me I think LinkedIn is missing the boat, although their blog, they have a pretty good blog. I will give them that. But I would give, if I were LinkedIn, I'd pay money for your endorsement, if a verbal endorsement. So Dan, what do you think? Just hearing that, what would you do about your profile? Why do you think your profile is under optimized?
Well, I don't think it's under optimized. I just, when I do get people looking at my profile, a lot of times it's temp agencies or, people trying to reach out. Hey, I have a potential, blah, blah, blah. Now, my question would be, though, I mean, I come from a big city and I moved over here to a smaller city. And I've noticed that in the small towns, people don't use LinkedIn or, it's like, hey, turn in your paper resume and then we'll call you if we like you. So
Dan, they only have 300 million. It's a drop in the bucket still. Come on. I live in a big, small city. I live in South Florida and on the coast. If I would go door to door, I'd say, I'm doing a quick survey. It's going to be very easy. Are you on LinkedIn? The answer will be, what is LinkedIn? Not that I'm on it or off it. So it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to save that same experience. Believe me. Yeah, that's what it is.
But I'm in Guam, and it's the same way.
Yeah.
Very few, big businesses and investors are actually openly listing themselves on LinkedIn, which I find very disappointing. But the good news for you is if you start now.
Yeah.
When they
Dan,
become aware, you're already.
The only thing to be aware of is to watch out for people who got secrets about LinkedIn or tips. The only reason they're secrets and tips is that because you have to pay them $500 to have them reveal stuff that is well known. Just go on. Here's my first advice. You've heard about Lewis Howes, and I'm sure he's got a group. Nate Kiefman has a group called Linked Strategies, not associated with LinkedIn, and it's free. And if you need a name, you can use Monty, you can use Steve Shannon or whatever. Sign up for the blog and get involved and devote 20 minutes. Monty, I'd like your ideas about this. 20 minutes a week to keeping your LinkedIn profile, for sure, get it optimized under, which is, that's just what LinkedIn says. No. Get it so that it is pinpoints. You can get the people who come to you, and I think the keywords will do that, instead of these temp agencies who are going to make you rich at $15 an hour.
We have a different definition of rich there.
Yeah,
Stephen. So.
Exactly. Yeah, but I mean, you want to attract people. I don't know your business. You haven't revealed that to me, but I suspect it's not a matter of having thousands of followers.
Right.
It's the quality of the followers that you interact with, so that immediately when the browser comes to you and takes a look at your profile, they know, oh, okay, this isn't what I thought, and they move on. And you don't care. What you want to get, Seth Godin, we're big fans of Seth Godin. I recommend. I'm not saying he promotes LinkedIn, but he's a very smart guy. And I used to follow him in the early 90s before it was fashionable. And he will tell you, if you've got 100 people who know you intimately, and you can do this, it takes a while, who will speak up on your behalf, you're on your way. Yeah. The magic 100. Right, Monty? Or not?
Yeah.
That's imperative. I mean, that's the same thing with, any movement. It's really having those 100 key people and support. And to me, that's also, this is a sidebar, but directly related. That's where the masterminds come in. And that you don't necessarily, even to the 100, you don't necessarily have the 100, but if you have the core, who one, keeps accountable, but two, is willing to support almost any and everything you're willing to put out there that's positive, that's what you're looking for, that group of people. So back to your area, there might not be a lot of people on LinkedIn, but if you found a core group of people, even building a meetup that are like, hey, we want to advance our mission, and that might be helping each other with LinkedIn recommendations. Like, LinkedIn is an amazing tool because others will find you, and it is a cool search engine for businesses and people that are, that's the thing that I thought was very interesting to me. The people that have LinkedIn profiles, they're usually authentic, actual people. It might have changed now that it's like 3-4.
Like Dan, does he not represent right away first impressions? You don't get a second chance, right? Corny but true. Dan, you could be bare-chested, or you could be with a shirt and tie. My attitude is no like and trust. You exuded that. What do you think, Andrea, from the female perspective? You want to get acquainted with Dan. You want to know what he's doing. And more importantly, Dan, how can we help you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think here's the thing, and everything that Stephen and Monty are saying is absolutely true. And take actionable steps, because say you send 5 messages a day to actual people on LinkedIn, even if it's just 5. Make sure you take a call a day, schedule a call, something like that. Amen.
Now, when you say send a message, I mean, why would I be reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn?
Why not?
Why not?
For me, it was really, really specific. I actually, when I didn't know who was in my network. When that person said to me, hey, you have this person in your network. And I think one of the things people don't appreciate about LinkedIn is you have first-degree connections, you have second-degree connections, you have third-degree connections. All of those are people that are within your network, and you can continue to grow your network. LinkedIn's purpose is to show you who's linked in your actual network. An example of the value of this is why LinkedIn was formed. Back to the PayPal mafia. They were all people who were all associated with PayPal initially. And when PayPal got bought by eBay, most of them were rich, and they left eBay and thought, okay, what are we going to do now? And they stayed in touch. They stayed linked to one another, and they ended up starting their own separate companies, doing own different. I mean, they created Planeteer. They created by the virtue of LinkedIn, Facebook exists today. By the virtue of LinkedIn, obviously LinkedIn exists. These were things that were all associated, and the way they built their networks and their systems was, hey, you might not know me directly, but you might know somebody I'm linked to. And because you know who I'm linked in, talk to them. They'll then refer you to me, and that's how you can get connected with me. So case in point, the reason I physically was able to go to LinkedIn, the building itself, was because I was connected to a person who had spoken at LinkedIn previously. And that situation was something I had no idea about. I mean, I was in Silicon Valley randomly at one particular time. I was trying to connect with somebody else, and I couldn't connect them directly, but I just found that I was connected to this person. Because I was connected to that person, though I didn't know was in the area, I was then able to go to LinkedIn, Yahoo, Google, all those things based on that network of what I actually had. So the point of it is LinkedIn is about who is in your network and who also that are in their network that you can.
And here's the thing: I wasn't being a smart butt when I said why not. I'm saying have a free opportunity to connect with every single person who finds you interesting. What you have to do is look at their stuff and say, hey. Service is always paramount in every business, right? You're a service. And when you look at it from that perspective, every connection is a service that you can provide, whether it's free or paid. But the payoff there is a relationship. People that will follow you for years and years and years. And just by one simple message, maybe 2, 3, a phone call, a year. I mean, these are very simple ideas and simple concepts. Napoleon Hill talks about it. How to
influence people.
They talk about that all the time, and it's absolutely true. If you take 1 minute out of your day, or 1 30-minute phone call out of your day, they remember you. And why not?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if I can just spend a minute or two giving a shout out or something on LinkedIn, I guess would be more beneficial. I mean, how can it not be, you know?
Make it more.
Well, Dan, also, I apologize for stepping on Andrea's comment. You got to get some psychic income from it. If you go on there and feel like you're shouting in the wind, you can change that comment any way you want.
Right.
And you're not getting feedback. I miss, Monty, answering questions. I think you can still do that, but in the early days of LinkedIn, in one Sunday, I got 6 new valid monthly paying clients from all over the United States. I don't think it was overseas at the time. Just by simply answering questions in that particular topic of job search. And people were saying, well, nobody's reading my resume, or I sent a resume out and no one answered, or whatever. And we tried to say, slow down a little bit. And then people right away would say, hey, I could use your help. I'd say, look, I promise to be on here, no charge. I'd be glad to do that initially. Then if you like me and I like you and we can help and so on. Ended up with 6 clients. I'll never forget it was, I don't know the year, but it was an April Sunday, just on a lark. I began to interact with people only by keying in. I am a slow touch typist. There was no video. And by the way, Monty, my prediction is that for a fee, the photograph or the profile picture you're going to click it and have it like a 6-second or 8-second Vine type video that's got to really be done awfully well. But I think you're going to have to pay for it. You know, I think it's going to happen, don't you?
I think it does. I think it happens because as we move to a technology that is much more, streaming is becoming popular. So I think LinkedIn's going to.
Yeah, I do. But Dan, tell us what you do. And are we a potential customer? And if we're not, convince us that we should be.
Putting me on the spot a little bit. As you could tell, I'm a little new to Blab. You know, it's funny. Let me give you a quick backdrop on why I think
sure, go ahead.
Just a quick
We're all
funny
ears.
story. You know, I ran like 2 blabs. I signed up like 2 days ago or something. I ran 2 blabs, and yesterday this guy came on. You know, friendly guy. I think his name was David Sama. I think he's on here regularly. But
Sure.
anyways, he asked me the same thing. You know, and I, you know. Hey, what do you do? So I started giving my pitch, you know, and then and it was just me and him because he was coming in. He could tell that I was the only one in the blab, and he was like, "Listen, man," he's like, "Stop." He's like, "Stop pitching your idea, you know, your services right now." And I'm like, "Well, you just asked me what I did, you know," and well, so I don't want to come in here and tell you, "Hey, man, listen, I'm an accountant," you know.
All right, Dan. Here, say this.
What's up?
Tell me your passion.
Oh,
I want to know about you personally. I don't give a rat's rear end about your moving numbers around on a spreadsheet.
Right.
What makes your day, other than your family or predilections or whatever, but what is your passion?
Sure. So my passion, you know, in the time of my life where I'm at right now, where I've already had the experience, I've been to school and I've done everything that I've wanted to do in my career. Now I want to shift over into building my own company and educating the population in financial.
You want to give of your gifts.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know,
and you're good at financial things. Why do you think you're good at financial things?
Well, you know, I from my reputation, you know, they've told me I'm good, you know, so
right.
Like, for example, you know, I don't know, you guys, I'm sure if you guys are in the United States, I'm sure you guys file taxes, you know, and
yeah, latest I know. I'm not in jail, so
right. And you know, one of the biggest things that really caught me and my partner, you know, when I moved up here, is that people are so like taxes and accounting to them is just so boring. And him and I were just like, yeah, it's boring, but it's so important. You know, every dollar that you make, who you got to pay first is the government, you know. So to be honest with you, a quick little thing of what I do, you know, Steven or Monty, you know, do you guys get a tax return at the end of the year? Yeah.
You mean from a CPA? You mean
no. Do you get a tax return? Meaning does the government give you back money at the end of the year?
No.
Well, Monty, no. I think you shook your head yes, and a lot of people shake their head yes. You know, they say, "Yeah, man, I get $5,000 at the end of the year," and then everybody, go ahead.
I was saying for me, it's really small. I try to minimize the amount that I actually government.
Yeah, I get it. We have a pretty good CPA. I get is zeros. I might prepay $2,000 that I would normally get back for blah blah blah, but it's minuscule like Monty.
Correct, and that's the goal. So you guys obviously know that you have a good accountant that is telling you, "Hey, listen, the point of this is to pay zero at the end of the year and to get back zero." You know, and that is so hard for people to understand because they get so excited at the end of the year with their big tax returns. I'm just like, that's, you know, you're basically allowing somebody to take that money and they invest that money on their own and you're getting zero back. So that opportunity cost is really where we come in, especially with business owners. Like I said, the idea started here in Asheville, North Carolina, is where I'm from and where I came back to now.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I was actually in South Florida. I went to school at Florida Atlantic University.
Wonderful. Yeah, they're doing pretty well in football now. Finally, the Owls are coming into their own. I don't think the Owls were head of football team at the time you were there, right? But
no, they did. I was there when they built the stadium. I don't know if you saw that stadium.
Asheville, I pronounce Asheville, but is Round Mountain still there? Does it in Brevard? I mean, where they have the music festivals, isn't that pretty close to Asheville?
Oh yeah, Brevard about 20 minutes away. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, everything I read, you're in a hot city. You are. So your passion, you're a hot market, and it doesn't matter where you are. By the way, you can serve people worldwide.
Exactly.
You know that, but it sounds like your passion is to see people saying, "I didn't think it was possible."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the key right there. That's kind of like the line, you know, that's the light bulb that we want to try to communicate and say it is possible. You know, especially with business owners, I mean, it's like you're good at one thing, and what's that good thing is probably building your product or, you know, selling whatever it is you sell. But business is so much more than just the product.
I had the privilege of assisting a person to go from a CFO under harness, you know, a W-4, W-2 form, and so on, to business for himself. And it took him 18 months to 2 years to replace his salary, total, and benefits, the cost of benefits. Usually it's 135% of his gross in that area. Pratt Whitney, it was more like 140%. But let's say, what is one of my clients? So 35%. Because I said you got to replace not only your income, but you've got to replace the benefits. So he became, which I think was sort of interesting, a fractional CFO. And it sounds like you don't just do tax forms. And if that's true, don't even say that. You know, don't talk about a tax form, and I'm just giving you from the heart here.
Sure.
I don't have all the answers. But my attitude is get deeply involved in the company, like being a fractional CFO. Beware now, they'll try to hire you to be full-time there. And I don't think that's what you want. You want to be working for yourself, but it's going to be irresistible because they're going to love you. I promise you, if you do it right and you engage them and get people talking about you, and you're a member of Rotary, which, by the way, has all the money, Lions have all the fun, Kiwanis does all the work. So pick the one that you ought to be involved in. I'm a Paul Harris Fellow of the Rotary Club, and I'm sure they have more than one in that area. I would recommend you be a guest at a couple of them and work it out. So, I mean, that's how this particular client got the profile. So if you could be with you and your partner, and I'm sure he has strengths that you have weaknesses, and you work you fill the gaps if there are any. Yeah. So I think it'd be more interesting to, especially if you produce some seminars that don't get necessarily free, but say that if it's $100 to attend the seminar or whatever, that'll be folded into, if you work together, it'll be no charge. It's to give away a seminar that you would give and talk about things, not secrets or tips, because people are turned off by that. We come alongside and engage in your medium to small and medium companies, so that, for example, he would stress, do you have a program where there's a requisition, where there's this and that before you pay a bill, you know, to make sure that you got the expenses, looking at the expenses. And I'm sure too, because you're an outgoing person, you'd be helpful in getting a rainmaker, getting people in there, new business. That's the organic business. But what do you think, Monty? You're self-employed. I bet you've got somebody where you're not terribly finance oriented or maybe interested in that. I'll bet you've got a sidekick, because that's what I have.
I do, but the funny part is I was curious. I was talking to Andrea a little bit about this earlier. So I got a few offers today, totally not because I asked one, but because it came to me. What do you think?
No surprise.
What do you think?
From LinkedIn, right?
Say again?
From LinkedIn.
You're right. So back to Dan's point, this was from LinkedIn. A lot of LinkedIn is a powerful tool. I keep forgetting of the power of LinkedIn.
It's so good to be in your company, because people they want to admit that, because they will work at it.
Yeah, no, I'm a LinkedIn addict, and I was actually doing
testimony, and you're so believable.
Yeah, but anyway, so
by the way, who's driving your car for you, and how long has that chauffeur been in your employ?
That's a whole nother conversation.
Okay, sorry.
But to the point, with CFOs, and you mentioned the CFO thing, and I'm actually going to go in like 2 minutes. With CFOs specifically, what do you think are good qualities for CFOs of public companies?
You asking me or asking
anybody? But I'm asking Stephen because he mentioned the CFOs. So my opinion was different, and I actually talked to.
You know what a great CFO is? It doesn't act like a CFO. You know, I'm the CFO, and I've got all the secrets, and I know. And this particular person, okay, I'll mention his name because I'm proud of him. Not what I did, what he did. He He comes from a solid family, Boca Raton, Florida, Lebanese via Jamaica. And his dad basically got Boca Raton up to the point where it is today and building $1 million houses when they were worth $1 million. I mean, they were fabulous. So what did he do? He was deeply involved in one of the few Christian churches in Boca Raton. He gave of himself in every possible way. And next, he witnessed to prospective. Now, you don't have to say, I'm not saying you have to be a Christian, but he hit head on to these people and say, now understand, I believe in Jesus Christ. I sold out to him as a young person. And you may not want to work with me because he didn't wear it on his sleeve. He just simply said, he witnessed to it to prospective customers. Wow. When those men said, hey, that's fine, no particular problem. Others who'd say, maybe not. But the majority of the people, and he didn't have to say it but once. He behaved as a solid citizen, as a giver, not a getter. By the way, if you want to really get into this, Bob Berg, who lives in the same county with me here in Palm Beach County, he wrote the book with a partner, the first analogy or allegory, I guess you could say, called The Go-Giver.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody,
Yes.
you familiar with that book? And Bob Berg, by the way, is very approachable. But read the books first so that you have it up to speed. By the way, I ran into somebody who saw, I was at a waiting room at a doctor's office, and a lady came in and she said, you got Bob Berg's book, The Go-Giver? I said, yeah, well, what about it? She said, I am so embarrassed. He's a pal of mine. I've never read his book. I said, that's all you have to tell me. Here's the book. She said, oh, no, I couldn't take your book. I said, the name of the book is The Go-Giver. You think I'm going to hold this?
Right.
I said, I got other copies of it. So what I'm saying is that if you can be a giver, you'll get. I mean, you've heard it before, but to actually practice it is to maybe help a nonprofit that you really believe in that has financial difficulties, and you go in to say, I don't have to be on the board. I would love it. I'll have to prove myself first. But here's my background and skills. I'm back in Asheville. I love this area. Boom, ba-da-boom. How can I help you? Well, if it's a substantial or even unsubstantial, one day it will be substantial, thanks to you, and you become on the board, who are you going to rub elbows with?
Exactly.
Other self-employed business owners, managers, and so on.
Guys, I have to go, but great talk. Andrea, we'll talk soon. Daniel, I'm going to follow you as well. And Stephen, I look forward to talking to you. But this has been a great talk.
Monty, I think we're already following each other, but because we've talked before in other blabs. But my hat's off to you. You present yourself in such a positive way. You're irresistible.
Thank you. Humbly, you are as well.
Monty, man, thanks for the advice. Have a good day.
You. Absolutely.
You guys.
So, Dan, it's all positive. I mean, you're going to do just great because the way in which you present yourself, I think you're the real deal. Don't you, Andrea?
Yeah, I agree, Dan. I mean, I know I haven't been talking much, but I agree. And interestingly enough, both Monty and I do have a little bit of a background in finance and accounting. So even if that is sort of our background, we kind of hone down on the message of what we're doing here and how we can help other people.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. So
that's what you're going to see, Dan, as you get more and more involved in Blab. But following up, telling your stories count. I mean, it's just that's the link. The link is not what your job is.
Right.
The link is who you are and why you do what you do from the standpoint of reaching out to help people. And that was the basic core of your message. I heard, Andrea, didn't you, that he wants to help people get from point A to point B. And it just happens to be in the financial side. But if you show up, and I don't mean going to breakfasts at the that's not the way you do it. Be on small committees. We learned this in church, or at least I did. Go to the Chamber of Commerce and say, what are the hot committees? Where do you need help in the small groups. That's where you get acquainted, not by going for breakfast and handing out a business card.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work.
Right. You want to actually give value. You want to actually deliver value to somebody.
Like I can see you're very authoritative when you're present.
Right.
And it's like welcoming authoritative where I feel like I can ask you something professionally and you would respond honestly. And I can see you leading a conversation specifically on why it's important for businesses to understand their accounting strategy or whatnot, or something in that area.
Right.
Especially new businesses, because they have no idea. They have no idea about accounting. I mean,
oh yeah. Well, I mean, that normal entrepreneur thought is like, oh, I have this idea, I have this product, let me go test it on the market, and it's so much more than that. It's like we have to slow down sometimes and understand that, okay, yeah, I have this great idea, but, if I'm trying to start a business, I got to make sure this is profitable, and I know the market is either going to like it or not, but I still have to count my bricks before I build this house. It's funny. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, get other people excited about you like we are.
Right.
They'll help you. They'll help you with the bricks. In fact, they probably find some old used bricks that are better looking than the new ones. And
right.
I know that's an analogy, and it's hard maybe because maybe you've not done this before. Don't let that bother you. By the way, are you an athlete?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I like to.
Okay. Can you coach soccer?
I do play soccer, and I want to coach soccer. I just had a little girl, a little baby daughter. So
whoa,
yeah, she's like 6 months. So I'm hoping the next.
I have 3 daughters, and two out of the 3 swam. They were swimmers as well, and then played soccer. And the middle daughter was a forward, I guess you would call them. I don't know the terminology, but she was particularly good as a goalie. And, as long as you've got a kid, that's a ticket to a lot of things. You might say, well, I want to use my youngster for that. Hey, you're training the youngster to be a real person.
Right.
She'll thank you for that. And a real person gets out there, and that's great news. And soccer is huge in most places. I don't know if I actually played I'm an asthmatic, so I didn't last very long, but I played with a professional team. They allowed me to do a couple of runs indoors in Kansas City, and it was the first in the new era of indoor professional soccer, and we filled Kemper Arena there many, many times. And my kids we had the whole team over for dinner, and it just went berserko. So when you do clinics, you see, if you be the soccer guy who incidentally is very smart in saving people money and ensuring their income grows, that is non-taxable or whatever, that you can have. But if you present yourself in that particular category, that's what we call Clausewitz on War, is a great book. I have it in my other room. And that is a flanking maneuver. Always think in flanking, not direct. Don't go right at him and say, hey, I'm a financial guy, we're going to do fine. No, you're going to say, where's the soccer leagues here? Right. Oh, soccer, great. Right. More food. Final thing. When I was running broadcast properties for Better Homes and Gardens, and I learned from them, because what is Better Homes and Gardens? It remembers, they talk about food, right? And before and after houses and so on. But what we learned is that if you talk in terms of the pocketbook, the heart, and your particular favorite interest, you have those 3 things going for you, you'll attract a lot of attention, and then they're ready for your story, your message. Because you know what they'll do? They'll say, by the way, you're really terrific in soccer, and you're grilling and whatever the deal is. I forgot to ask you, what do you do for a living? And you're going to say internally, I thought you'd never ask.
Right.
And you say, look, we could talk about that a little later. No, I really want to know.
Right.
Have them try to pull it out of you.
Right.
It is dynamite. Andrea, true or not?
Yeah, very true. It's the concept of attraction marketing. Show people
That's
who
it.
you are first, and then don't chase them. Let them chase you.
And it's funny, my partner says to me this all the time because we've been running for like a year, and I've come from I used to be a W-2 employee, accountant straight up. All I know is numbers, blah blah blah. I was never like I'm a personable guy. I like
Absolutely
people, and I'm social. But when it comes to talking business, the first thing I do, if you ask me, hey, what do you do? Bam, I jump into like this accountant role, and in my head, I'm like, yeah, man, I put together tax returns and income statements and stuff, and people are just like, yeah, bro.
That's like you're selling insurance.
Exactly.
Here, I want you to read this insurance policy. You just make them go. You make that go away, because you want to. So, and I'm saying what I'm repeating exactly what Andrea says. Is the attractor factor does work. I know that a lot of people think it's a little bit weird, but it absolutely works. And by the way, see if Andrea agrees with this. One day, sit down. You don't have to have multiple pages. You don't have to go into strategic planning, but write down what you foresee. You and your partner, write down what you see your company wants to do and what's going to just do 3 years. First year this, second year here, third year here, and you keep rolling it over and rewriting it. But if you don't put your planning or idea, let's put it this way, in writing with free writing, if you know what that is, doesn't matter if you don't, it's just get it in writing. I've got to tell you, it will truncate, it'll collapse 6 months. You cut off the 18 months that it normally takes to replace your income that you had to do it to yourself. And if your partner is not more the outside person, you're very likely, if the two of you get along, I can't believe that you're identical in your personality traits. No. So if you're the outgoing guy, you be the rainmaker, get out there, do the soccer, and let your partner, whatever his passion or her passion is, okay.
I mean,
very exciting. Yeah, very exciting.
Everything you just said, writing everything down. That's why I was looking around my room because I every day I write in my notebook. I have
Good. You got a journal going.
Oh yeah. I mean that's how I stay organized. That's how I complete all my action tasks. What I got to do is in there. And I kind of misrepresent to myself because what we are first, my company is strategy. First we're strategy, and then we're everything else, So when you talk about leading with your strategy, 1 to 3 years and stuff like that, I completely agree with, and that's the most important. That's the most important thing, And it's funny you say writing things down. I was reading this in the book I have called No Excuses by Brian Tracy. But
he's terrific. He's terrific.
And he says in there, they did a study. The USA Today did a study that. If you did not write down your New Year's resolution, only 4% of people actually completed their New Year's resolution if they didn't write it down. But if for the people that did write down their New Year's resolution, 44% of them actually completed the New Year's resolution, which represents like an 1100% success rate, let's call it.
And it's not anything magic. It isn't. It isn't. I'd love to tell you there's all these secrets and there's great books, and I've read a lot of them. But you know what? It's taking action. And by the way, don't get caught into the thing of time management. You know what it is? It's energy management.
Right.
The reason I'm energized today, I've just gone through my annual physical and I'm about done. And I've got a few years on me. So they want to find out. He says, you're hiding something in that body. You can't have that good a blood report. You can't have that great urology report or the situation the men go through and so on and so forth. So when I can defeat the best that I can find doctors, that's what pumps me up my energy. And Andrea's been exposed to me. And I get a lot of doctors saying, he says, I get a lot of people that are 10 years younger than you are who are on walkers who come in here. And I go, yes, every day I can get up and defeat the doctors. So if you make sure you get an annual physical, that your energy and you feel energized by the fact that you are healthy and treat your body correctly, you won't have to worry about time management. You will find the energy to do the work, and you're going to defeat, I hate to say this way, but I'm going to say it, you defeat the competition because they won't put the energy into it than you will. And that affects your customers as well and say, my God, man, do you ever slow down? Where do you get all this energy? I want to have what you have. And when they say that to you, Dan, I got to tell you, you're home free. You're on your way. You're going to have to sort and make sure that the people that you work with have the same attitude. If they may have a lot of money and want to pay you a lot of things to fix things, and then they walk away, you walk away.
Right.
They have to be engaged. They have to be engaged. And I see that in you. Maybe I'm off base, but I don't think so. The fact that you've found Blab, I don't know how you found Blab, but that's a very clear indication that you're an early adopter. There's some negatives to that too. But the fact is, you're willing to try and to experience new things. And that means when you hire your customers and look at it that way, you're going to make some good decisions. You might have to turn down people that will sound really juicy and like, my God, they need a lot of help and they've got a lot of money and they're wasting a lot of money. That's a signal to watch out. Get people that are on the same page with you and your partner.
Right. I mean, one of the things I knew.
I don't know what time it is in Guam, but I've never been on a Blab with Andrea at this hour. So, Andrea, what time of day is it in Guam? I've lost track.
Oh, it's about 1:30 in the morning, standard Blab issue time.
It's what?
It's 1:30 in the morning, Stephen.
Oh, it still is. It's the next day then. So it's Saturday morning where you are.
Saturday morning here.
Well, I think you should be on at this time more often. And I'm selfish because, yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's definitely trying. I mean,
yeah.
Daniel, keep doing what you
Well, I don't want to hold you up. I said that I would have the sense to get off early, and I got enthusiastic because of you and Monty and Dan. So I apologize. I get wound up easily.
Oh, no, I'm so
I'm going to let you guys. Well, my pleasure to be with you. Well, I'm going to let you and Dan talk a little bit more because that's the beautiful part of what Andrea does as a host. She turns it on and says, have fun, go for it, and attracts terrific people. And you see that, you've seen that here. For example, while you're talking, you said the tech buzz. It's all about being good at your craft. Know your strengths and build on them. Surround yourself with like-minded people and challenge yourself. They will challenge you to think outside the box, which is necessary to be a leader in the field. So I'm going to drop out. Maybe you'd like to have that individual come on because he's on. I mean, Dan, you're getting some fairly good stuff here, if I may be so bold, at no charge, and that's a clue to you. You do the same thing when you run your Blab, okay? So I'm gonna duck out because my wife gets home early, and I want to be sure the kitchen is in great shape when she gets here. So thanks very much for letting me participate, and Dan, congratulations early. I'm very excited, and you're in everything I read, Forbes and other publications. Fast Company magazine, which I strongly recommend you look at, Inc., and so on. Asheville is right in the top 10 of a great place to be. So hats off to you for that decision. So that's fabulous. Andrea, I look forward to being with you again, and you're welcome. And it was a pleasure to get reconnected with Monty, thanks to Andrea. So, you can't hurt too much, Dan, being around Andrea. She attracts very positive people who are a great resource as well. So long for now.
Thanks, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Andrea, I have to step out as well. I have to take a phone call here. But if it doesn't last too long, I will jump back on, all right?
Actually, Daniel, it was really nice meeting you. I'm about to shut it down too as well. But if you host a Blab, let me know. I followed you, and I'll just jump on and support you. I'm very excited for you. Congratulations on your baby.
Thank you. Andrea, let me ask you a quick question. When you say follow me, does that actually go on Twitter, or is that just only in the Blab?
Just Blab. So
okay.
If you clicked over my name, for example, you would see a little bird.
Uh-huh.
Over it, and then you can follow me on Twitter, and that is a separate sort of entity.
Oh, so I click on the bird and then I follow you on Twitter. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you go on live, just let me know by saying, just broadcasting it to everyone, and I'll come and support you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here, and best of luck to you.
Have a good day, all right?
Yes.
Get some rest.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.